Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto Became a Demon Dragon Rider. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
A man in a cloak stood next to a big ship that was docked in the port of a town with strong defenses. He sighed and closed his eyes as he looked out at the open ocean. The man with hazel eyes opened his eyes when he thought someone was coming. When he turned around, he saw a woman coming toward him. She was dressed in a stylish dress that covered most of her body. She had dark skin, and her long, black hair was braided. A gold tiara with a single diamond in the middle was on her head. She looked at him and said, "I wish you would stay." The man gave a headshake. He said, "I have nothing left here. There's no reason for me to stay." His voice was heavy and sad. She let out a sigh. She asked softly, "What about your cousin or your successor? They need you, and I need you to help me." The person shut his eyes. "No, you're a strong leader, and my successor will serve you well. Roran will be fine, and so will you, Nasuda." With that, the figure walked past her and up the gangplank of the ship, which was ready to set sail. Nasuda, who used to lead the Varden and is now queen of the men of Algesia, watched with sadness as one of her best friends and closest allies left this land for good. She said, "Goodbye, Aragon Shadeslayer," softly, and turned away. In Fire Country, written 164 years later. Naruto Uzumaki, a blonde genin from Konohagakure no Sado, yelled to his sensei, Ero Sennin, "I need some help with that new version of the Rasengan we talked about." The 14-year-old blonde genin was wearing a black and dark orange jacket, dark orange pants, and a black headband made of cloth. His old clothes, which were bright orange and blue, were better. He moved his pack and scratched one of his 6 scars that looked like whiskers. The whisker marks were a sign that Naruto was holding the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the demon fox that attacked Konoha on Naruto's birthday, October 10, 14 years ago. The Yondaime Hokage gave his life to seal the demon in Naruto. Jiraiya of the Sannin, the person he was talking to, was an old man. He had long, spiky, white hair that went down to his waist. He wore an olive-colored jacket and pants, a mesh shirt under the jacket, gauntlets on his arms, and a red vest over the jacket. He also had samurai sandals made of wood and a headband with a double-horned metal plate that said, "Oil," in kanji. Jiraiya was one of the 3 legendary Sannin, or shinobi, who were trained by the Sandaime Hokage himself. He was also known as the legendary Toad Sage and wrote a series of books called Icha Icha. He let out a sigh. "Gaki, I have a name. It's Jiraiya. Say it with me, Jiraiya. If you can't call me sensei, at least call me that." His arms were crossed. He told him, "Not until you stop looking at girls." Jiraiya sighed. He yelled, "Kid, I'm a writer, and I need to do research for my books." Naruto gave a snort. He said, "What, you can't write real stuff? You have me edit some of your rough drafts, and other than all the smut, they're good. Why don't you try writing something real?" Jiraiya just sighed. He said, "I tried that once, but the book didn't sell very well." Naruto groaned. Fine. I won't bother you about the books. But when you stop spying on girls, I'll call you Jiraiya Sensei." He looked around the forest path they were walking on. He stood up straight when he saw a small flash of motion. He glanced at Jiraiya, who nodded. They kept going until all of a sudden, someone attacked them. Jiraiya pushed Naruto out of the way and jumped to the other side as an explosive-tipped kunai fell where they had been standing. The explosion made a huge cloud of smoke. At that moment, a lot of shinobi showed up and split into 2 groups to take care of their target. The smaller group went in search of Naruto. Jiraiya smiled at the shinobi, but when he saw the symbol on their headband, he became serious. It was a musical note that said these shinobi were from Otogakure no Sado, the village hidden in the sound, and that Orochimaru, the rogue Sannin of Konoha, lived there. He gave them a growl. "What are Oto shinobi doing in the Fire Country borders?" "We're helping Otokage-sama, and you don't need to get in the way," they said, and then they attacked. Naruto was attacked by 4 shinobi from the Oto village. He made a growling sound as he took out a kunai. "You serve Orochimaru, don't you?" he said. The leader of the shinobi laughed. He said, "Yeah, so?" With a sneer. Even more, Naruto growled. "Where is he? I want to kick his behind." Naruto said, and then he attacked. A Junin leader laughed and blocked the kunai attack. The Junin blocked Naruto's punch again, and then kicked at him. Naruto was thrown back and hit a tree so hard that it broke. He let out a groan and then turned into smoke. At the same time, kunai and shuriken fell from the trees all around them. The Junin and 2 of his subordinates jumped out of the way, but the 4th was hit by the weapons and fell in a pool of blood. From the trees, several Narutos came out and attacked the 3 auto shinobi. Jiraiya used taijutsu and ninjutsu to easily kill a number of his enemies. But there were so many that he lost track of Naruto and couldn't find him. He growled and then slammed his fist into the gut of an auto shinobi, sending him into 2 others. Jiraiya thought, "Hold on a little longer, Naruto," as he watched Naruto run through a series of hand signs before firing fireballs at his enemies. Naruto found that he was pushed back. Even though he could make copies of himself, the 3 auto shinobi were able to move around him and his copies. The 2 Chunin killed Naruto's clones with weapons and the occasional jutsu, while the Junin mostly focused on pushing Naruto back. Naruto dodged a punch and tried to sweep a Junin's leg, but the Junin jumped over it. One of the Chunin threw a kunai at Naruto's leg, forcing him to jump back. When he hit the ground, the Junin gave him a hard kick to the chest. Naruto flew out of the trees, hit the ground, and started rolling toward a canyon. He stopped and stood up. Then he watched as 2 of his clones were thrown out of the trees and disappeared. He snarled and unrolled a scroll, which caused a giant shuriken to appear. Just as one of the auto Chunin came out, he threw it. It tore into his stomach and came close to splitting the shinobi in 2. His blood and guts were all over the ground, and the other Chunin who had been hiding in the trees saw them. He yelled at Naruto in disgust and anger, and then he growled at him. He yelled, "I'll kill you for that." Naruto smiled and called an army of clones to help him. "Oh, yeah? Well, just try. I won't stop until I've fulfilled my dreams and promises." The Chunin just laughed and held up several kunai with explosive tags in each hand. He yelled, "Say goodbye," as he threw them, just as the Junin came into view. The Junin yelled, "No, don't." But it was too late. Jiraiya had just killed the last of the ninja who were attacking him and was on his way to find Naruto when he heard a series of huge explosions. He fell down, and when he looked up, he saw a cloud of smoke. He yelled, "Naruto," and ran in the direction of the explosions. A seated figure looked up from the scroll he was reading in a cave in the canyon below. "So, what is it?" The figure gets up, grabs a sword in a blue sheath, and walks away from the table he was sitting at. The Chunin was grabbed by the auto Junin. "We were supposed to catch him, you fool." "I don't care. He killed my brother and Gurk." The ninja stopped talking as a kunai pierced his throat, spraying blood on the Junin's face. In an instant, Jiraiya was on him and knocked him down. He shook the auto Junin and yelled, "Where is he? Where is my godson?" When the Junin didn't answer, he hit him until he was out, and then he ran to the edge of the canyon. There were a few half craters along the edge of the cliff that was still there. But the pieces of orange and black cloth were what Jiraiya was most interested in. Then, he saw a dull flash of light. He ran to it, and when he saw what it was, he fell to his knees and started crying. The cloth on Naruto's headband was torn, and the metal plate was tarnished and broken. He shook his head and got to his feet, then looked over the edge. He could see pieces of things that had been blown up down below. He jumped down and stuck to the walls with chakra until he reached the bottom. He ran quickly through the mess, looking for Naruto with all his might. He found a few more pieces of cloth and some blood near the river at the bottom of the canyon. He shook his head and called up a small orange and black toad with a blue vest. "Gamakichi, I need you to look for Naruto. He might be seriously hurt or worse. Find him quickly." The usually talkative toad nodded and went in one direction, while Jiraiya went in the other. The cloaked person watching from a cave about 10 feet above the ground went unnoticed by both of them. The figure watched them for a moment, then turned back to the cave and went inside. It muttered something in a foreign language, which made a huge boulder roll into the cave's entrance and seal it. Konoha, 3 days later. The Godam Hokage of Konoha, Tsunade Senju, put a curse on her luck. The blonde Hokage had a lot of paperwork that she had put off for a long time. As she finished filling out a form and moved on to the next one, she sighed. "Why do I have to do it again? Why did I agree to take this dull job?" She wondered. Then she looked at a picture that was on her desk. It showed her standing next to a blue and orange tracksuit wearing Naruto, who was 13 years old. She smiled as she thought back to the day that picture was taken. Yes, you're right. Because my friend's son gave me a reason to believe again. Still, when it's his turn to be in charge, Gaki is going to hate me. Tsunade smiled and laughed, then went back to work. Shizune, her assistant, came in and stopped her. Shizune was the niece of Tsunade's dead lover Dan and had been her apprentice for a long time. The Junin with black hair was upset as she stumbled over to Tsunade's desk. As she stopped at Tsunade's desk, she tried not to cry. Tsunade looked at her with a puzzled face. What is it, Shizune? What's wrong? Shizune just stood there and cried. Then she looked at Tsunade. JJJ Jiraiya. Jiraiya-sama is here. She started crying and fell to the floor, sobbing and breaking down. Right away, Tsunade got up from her desk and gave Shizune a hug. Don't worry, it's okay. But what about Jiraiya? He was supposed to be with Naruto on that training trip. Said a voice that sounded so sad that it was almost dead. Jiraiya came in slowly. His clothes and hair were dirty, torn, and messed up. He took a bottle of sake from Tsunade's hidden stash behind her bookshelf and drank it right away. Tsunade looked up at her friend who was also on her team. Tsunade asked, Jiraiya? Where's Naruto? What's going on? With fear in her voice. Jiraiya just looked down at the bottle, then set it down and picked up another one. He took something out of his pocket slowly and put it on her desk. When Naruto's headband hit the ground, it clattered. We were attacked by Auto Shinobi. I learned that Orochimaru sent them to capture Naruto so he could experiment on him. One of his ninjas blasted Naruto off a canyon cliff. I looked for him for 2 days. He drained the bottle and set it down. When I got in, I sent the only shinobi who was still alive to Ibiki. Slowly, Tsunade reached out and touched the headband, while tears ran down her face. She looked at him and whispered, No, Jiraiya, no, he can't be. Jiraiya just let out a sigh and sat down. I found nothing but blood and a few pieces of cloth. I think he fell into the river at the bottom of the canyon and drowned, he said as he closed his eyes. I never got to tell him how much he reminded me of his father and how much I cared for him, Jiraiya sobbed into his hands. I didn't tell him anything. I'm a failure. Orochimaru was right. Even now, Tsunade was still crying. How could this happen? I thought he was the one. She grabbed her neck as if it were a necklace. 2 years ago, she wore a necklace that was worth a lot of money. Her grandfather, the Shodai Hokage, had given it to her. She had given it to 3 people in her life, her brother Nawaki, her lover Dan, and then Naruto. Each one of them had wanted to be Hokage. Each one of them had taken the necklace. Each of them was dead now. She thought that Naruto could break the necklace's curse. But it turned out she was wrong. She slowly got up and almost limped to her desk as she moved slowly. She sat down and took the band off her head. I can't believe he's dead. I'm sending 2 ambu squads, our best trackers. When they come back with their report, I'll make an announcement, she said, barely able to stay in control of herself as she shook. Jiraiya slowly nodded. I'll wait for them by the south gate, he said as he stumbled out of the office. Tsunade sat there for a while, then fell into her seat and cried her eyes out. Why? He didn't deserve this. Oh, Kami-sama, why? She sobbed, falling to the desk and crying her heart out. Not known where. Naruto's eyes slowly opened, and he blinked. His eyes looked around, but he couldn't make out much. He slowly tried to move, but it hurt so much that he screamed. His whole body hurt so much that it felt like one big pot. A dark blur appeared above him all of a sudden, and as his hand went to his head, it started to glow. As he started to lose consciousness, he heard a voice in his head. Sleep. The person moved away from the boy who was asleep and sighed. He was only able to do so much. When the bomb went off, he had to leave the cave he had been living in. He found a 14-year-old boy with broken bones and open wounds, including the bones of his right arm sticking out of his skin. The boy's clothes were torn in places. Right away, he did what he could to help the boy and then moved him into the cave. Just as he put the blonde on the floor, Red energy leaked out of him and covered the boy, healing him. The wounds on the boy should have killed him in less than an hour after whatever happened. But that power. No matter what it was. It is keeping the boy alive and healing him much faster than usual. The person walked over to a desk and started mixing herbs before turning back to look at the boy. He had blankets, bandages, and splints all over him. The person in the cloak sighed as he finished what he was doing and left the cave room he had carved out of the rock. He coughed and doubled over all of a sudden. As he coughed, he leaned against the wall and coughed up some blood onto the floor. As soon as it stopped, the figure stood up. I don't have a lot of time. I have to find someone to look after them. The figure went into another room and stopped in the middle. There was a big pedestal made from a stalagmite with a cushion on top. And there were two big stones on that cushion. One was dark blue and the other was very dark. As he ran his hands over the stones, he sighed. He might be able to do it instead of me. Konoha, 2 weeks later. As she left the stairs that led to the roof of the Hokage's tower, Tsunade closed her eyes. Naruto's headband, which had not left her sight or body for more than 2 weeks, was tightly gripped in her hands. She still gripped it to give herself strength for what she had to do now. All of Konoha came together to hear this news. Some people were confused, and some were excited. One of the people there was a 14-year-old girl. She had pale skin that was hidden by a big white and lavender coat, black capric pants, a headband around her neck, and indigo hair that reached her shoulders. Her lavender eyes with no pupils were very interesting to look at. Hinata Hyuga was the oldest daughter of the leader of the Hyuga clan, and she was the rightful heir to that position. Hinata sighed as she leaned back against a building wall and sighed again. I wish Naruto-kun were here with us. She had a thought in her head. Since they were in school together, the Hyuga heiress had a huge crush on Naruto. But she couldn't tell him because she was a shy girl who didn't believe in herself. Even though they weren't on the same team, they worked together on a number of missions after they graduated. During a mission to find a rare insect and another mission to protect a daimyo's daughter, she realized that she liked him more than just a crush. Even though he barely paid attention to her, she really liked that blonde. But that last part got better, and he even told her that he thought of her as one of his best friends. She had nothing to say for more than an hour because of that fact. She let out a sigh as she saw Tsunade stand up. All she wanted was to go home and get back to training. Neji and her father had both started to help her. But the elders of the council still thought she was weak. She had to get strong so they couldn't get Hiyashi to mark her and put her in the branch. Changing her clan would be impossible if that happened. As Tsunade took a deep breath, she closed her eyes. People of Konoha, I have news to share. As many of you know, Naruto Uzumaki and Jiraiya went on a 3-year training trip with Jiraiya last year. Jiraiya came back to Konoha over 2 weeks ago, and he and Naruto were attacked by shinobi from Otogakure no Sato. People in the crowd talked quietly to each other. Most of the shinobi and a good number of the civilians in the crowd were scared. All of them had taken the time to find out more about Naruto, and they couldn't understand why anyone would treat him badly. Others still hated the boy because they thought he was the Kyuubi or because they wanted to vent their anger, fear, and sadness on him. These people made angry noises. Someone else in the crowd was also angry, but for a different reason. You fool, Orochimaru. You told me you'd leave the Kyuubi kid alone, didn't you? Hinata was now paying close attention to Tsunade and holding her hands together out of fear. Tsunade put her eyes shut. Naruto Uzumaki was blown off a canyon, and his body hasn't been found, so it's assumed he's dead. People screamed and talked. Hinata's hands fell to her sides, and she leaned back against the wall and shook her head. But all of a sudden, a civilian cheered, and soon other people, both civilians and some shinobi, joined in. Tsunade snarled and snapped her fingers. Anbu. Hold those people. As soon as he said that, dozens of Anbu dropped on the people who were cheering and locked them up. How dare you cheer the disappearance of one of our shinobi? She yelled, her murderous intent pouring over the crowd. Naruto Uzumaki was a hero, but none of you idiots could see it. He protected this village every damn day of his life, and you all treated him like scum on your shoes. The leader of the Hyuga clan, Hiyashi Hyuga, scowled at the crowd. Even though he and the other Hyugas didn't cheer when they heard that Naruto had probably died, they were still happy. From their point of view, Naruto was an insult to their clan. He had the thing in his hands that had killed a number of their clansmen and Haishi's best friend, Minato Namikaze, who was their best ally and their best friend. On top of that, he looked like Minato, which made things even worse. Hiashi had led a number of secret attacks against Naruto, but they were never found out. Tsunade gave them a growl. 14 years ago, the Sandaime Hokage made a law about Naruto. This law was made shortly after the Yondaime Hokage defeated the Kyuubi. However, what you all were told was not true. The Yondaime didn't kill the Kyuubi. No human could. Instead, he sealed the Kyuubi inside of a newborn baby. The only baby born on October 10th. People who didn't know the truth put 2 and 2 together right away. Naruto is hated and left alone. The 10th of October was his birthday. Why he had weird whisker marks and chakra. Many of the younger people started talking to each other until Tsunade's voice was heard. The Yondaime wanted Naruto to be seen as a hero for containing Kyuubi and keeping him from destroying Konoha. But many people here didn't know the difference between a container and what was inside it, so the Sandaime made a law that said no one could talk about it or they would be killed. But that didn't stop you old goats from telling the young people to hate and ignore him. Why? As people looked at each other, they murmured. Tsunade just shut her eyes and gave up. Did none of you think that if you made his life a living hell, he might actually become what you thought he was? That he might turn on the village? Naruto loved this village with all his heart and was willing to die for it, and you all spat on him for something he couldn't help. Most of the crowd felt bad and looked down. Even if they had recently warmed up to Naruto, that didn't make up for how they had been before. But most of the people from the Hyuga clan laughed at Tsunade. Tsunade decided to finally say what she wanted to say. If the Yondaime had known how you all would treat Naruto, he would have let the Kyuubi kill you all, she said. The crowd started to protest at this point. One person in the crowd yelled, the Yondaime wouldn't care about some orphan brat. Tsunade gave him a mean look, and her ki was so focused on him that he wet his pants and then passed out. You fool. Do you really think the Yondaime would use an orphan to save this village? No. The Yondaime was selfless, and Naruto Uzumaki, the son of Kushina Uzumaki, and Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, were the ones he chose to hold the Kyuubi. At this, everyone stopped talking. Hiashi looked at Tsunade with wide eyes. He yelled, no, that's not true. You're lying. Am I, Hiashi-san? I have here certificates stating Naruto's true birth parents. A sealed letter from the Yondaime, meant for Naruto when he was 18, or a chunin. There is also a list of those who were supposed to care for Naruto, if his parents died. Top of the list is Jiraiya of the Sannin, followed by Hiashi Hyuga, Sume Inuzuka, Tuchi Ichiraku, and lastly, Hiruzen Sarutobi. She looked over them all. My sensei thought it would be best to keep Naruto's heritage a secret to protect him and Konoha from Iwa. I think this was a stupid choice, but I don't know why he thought this. Neji, who was standing nearby, looked at his uncle, who was also standing nearby. Hiashi got down on his knees slowly and shook his head. He kept whispering, no, it can't be true, it can't be, as tears fell from his eyes. Sume was sad and angry, and she was shaking. Kushina was one of her best friends, and when she heard Kushina was pregnant, she was happy because she thought their kids could play together like they used to. When it was said that Kushina was dead and her son couldn't be found, she cried for months. She had shown no interest in Naruto. She didn't hate the boy, but she didn't like him either, because of what he carried, which took away her happiness. In anger, she whispered, Sarutobi. Tsunade looked around. I hope you all realize what you've done. You all mistreated the son of our greatest heroes, and Konoha is supposed to be the strongest and most civilized village, she said. My grandfather and great-uncle would be ashamed if they knew their village had come to this, she said, turning away and going back inside. Many of the people in the crowd were now sad and horrified about what they had done. They had brought shame on themselves, the Hokage's memory, and their greatest hero. One ninja, a tall man with silver hair that defied gravity, wore a face mask and covered his left eye with a headband. He turned, and in a swirl of leaves, he was gone. He came back near a big stone with a lot of names written on it. He just stood there and looked at it for a while. Then Kakashi Hatake, son of the White Fang and famous copycat ninja, fell to his knees and started crying. Hinata was so shocked and sad that her cousin, Neji Hyuga, had to lead her back home. When he got there, he took her to her room and put her on her bed. She fell down with her eyes wide open and tears running down her cheeks. Neji closed his eyes, turned around, and went to grieve for the man whose death had made his life better. 3 days later. Naruto groaned as he slowly came out of his sleep. He opened his eyes a little. "Where am I? Stupid mortal. You almost killed us," roared a demon inside his head. Naruto flinched as he was suddenly pulled into his mindscape. There he found himself in a place that looked like a sewer. In front of him was a giant cage with a single piece of paper holding the door shut. Behind those locked doors, Naruto could see 2 blood-red eyes with black pupils. "You stupid insect. You could have killed us. Remember, what happens to me, happens to you." Naruto was stunned because this was the most the demon fox Kyuubi no Kitsune had ever said to him. The Kyuubi's growl woke him up from his trance. He yelled back at the fox, "Hey, chill out, Baka Fox. In case you forgot, a bunch of explosives were thrown at me. How was I supposed to get away from that?" Kyuubi snarled. "By using my chakra, or even better, by ripping this seal off my cage and setting me free." He shook his head. "That's not going to happen, so shut up and heal me." The fox was about to say something back when a voice rang through the sewer. "My. This is really cool." Suddenly, a figure in a cloak came into view. His hood was up, but the lower part of his face was visible, showing a graying beard. He looked up at the Kyuubi with a small smile on his lips, revealing hazel eyes. The man said, "So. I've found that this interesting boy has a lot of power in him." Naruto gave a growl. He asked, "Who are you? And where am I?" As he looked at Naruto, the man tilted his head. "Well, if you had been a little nicer, I might have told you my name. As for where we are, of course, it's your mind." Naruto snarled when he was mad. "I didn't mean that. Where are we?" The man didn't move, but all of a sudden, Naruto felt terrible pain. He fell to the ground, and Kyuubi did too, which was a surprise. They both screamed in pain. As quickly as it came, the pain went away. As the man looked at them, both the container and what it held slowly stood up. "Right now, I can see every memory you've ever had. I can easily make you do what I want. With a single thought, I could even crush your mind in the spirit of this fox. Don't test me." Naruto gave a growl. He asked in a soft voice, "What do you want?" He gave a smile. "I want to learn more about this boy I found and am trying to help, so please tell me your name." He said, "Naruto Uzumaki is a genin from Konoha and will be the next Hokage." Kyuubi laughed at that from behind him. Naruto gave him a dirty look and the man nodded. Hokage. Hokage. Ah, yes, they're the leaders of that big village a few hundred miles southeast of us, right?" He asked. The man smiled and Naruto just nodded. "That's a pretty big goal, especially since you're still a genin, which, according to your memories, is the lowest rank in your army." Naruto gave him a hard look. He yelled, "Hey, why are you going through my memories?" He did nothing but laugh. "Because you were unconscious and I couldn't reach you at all. Now, let me introduce myself. My name is Aragon. That's all you need to know." With that, he turned as if to leave. Naruto ran up to them. "Hey, wait. I have questions." Aragon turned around and stopped him with one hand, pushing Naruto down. He said, "Questions will come when you are well enough to walk," and then he was gone. Naruto woke up with a start and looked around. He saw a cloak leave the room through the doorway. He yells, "Wait," and sits up, but then he yells in pain and falls back down. He was still for a while before he finally relaxed. "I guess I have to stay here until I'm better." Naruto closed his eyes and thought about what was going on. Inside, Kyuubi is shocked that what looked like a normal person could get into Naruto's mind and hurt them both. The big fox lays down slowly. This is a cool thing to happen. Konoha, Hyuga compound. Since Tsunade told everyone, the village of Konoha had been in a state of shock and grief for 3 days. The Hyuga estate was the best place to see this. Most of the people in the group are depressed. People who had attacked Naruto because they thought they were getting revenge from Minato now cried because they had attacked the son of their best friend and leader. Some had even done seppuku because they thought their shame was too great to live. Hiyashi Hyuga had locked himself in his study and spent the whole day screaming about how he had betrayed him. When he finally came out, he had short hair, torn clothes, and a pale face. For 3 days, Hinata had been out of her room. As far as anyone knew, she hadn't moved from where Neji put her on the bed. Many people were afraid that she would die of hunger or thirst. Neji stood in front of Hinata's door and thought about whether he should go in or leave her alone. He finally decided that her safety was more important, so he went to knock on the door. As he did, the door opened on its own. Neji moved back as soon as he saw Hinata. She was wearing black pants and a long-sleeved shirt. She stood straight and tall. Her hair was braided, and a stone ring hung from the end of the braid to make it heavier. But her face was the most different. Her face looked like it was made of stone and couldn't show any more emotion. The eyes, though. Neji felt scared when he looked into the eyes of his cousin. They used to be shy and quiet, but they were kind and had a spark of strength that was waiting to be lit. But now, they were cold and seemed to have no feelings at all. The lavender had turned into a color that looked like white silver. Neji just looked at her. He asked nervously, Hinata-sama? Hinata looked at him, and he shivered because he thought she was going to kill him at any moment. Then she took her eyes off of him and left her room, walking down the hall toward the center of the Hyuga compound. Many people she passed on the way to her goal, the Hyuga Memorial Shrine, were also dumbfounded by the change in her. She didn't care about them, though, and kept going. Here, the names of the dead were written down so that future generations would remember them. Small shrines were built to honor the great heroes of the Hyuga clan. These shrines held items that were important to them or made them famous. One of these shrines belonged to Hitomi Hyuga, who was a great warrior in the Hyuga clan. Hitomi, unlike the rest of her clan, thought it was important to learn more than one way to fight. While the rest of her clan learned the Juken, she learned how to fight with a pair of special swords. She used these swords to great effect, even killing a platoon of Iwa shinobi with them during the Third War. After she died, about 9 years ago, her weapons and scrolls about her new fighting style were put in a shrine. Hinata walked up to this shrine and looked at the 2 swords that were standing on a stand there. They were thin blades with a large hook on the front, a blade guard that looked like a rectangle from the top of the hilt to the bottom of it, and a small dagger-like point on the bottom of the hilt. These blades were called hook swords because of the hook-shaped part at the front. Hinata ran a gentle hand over them before slowly picking them up one at a time. She looked at them, nodded, and then put them down again. Hinata-sama. What's going on? You can't do anything bad to Hitomi-sama's shrine. A branch member who was guarding the shrine area came over. Hinata looked at him, and his back fell when she looked at him with her cold eyes. Then she spoke, and her voice was colder than the coldest winter. You forget that you exist. She raised the swords and saw her reflection in them. I, Hinata Hyuga, daughter of Hiyashi and Hitomi Hyuga, claim the swords and scrolls that belong to my mother as my birthright. She said. The branch member turned pale and stepped back as Hinata held both swords by their handles with one hand, took the scrolls from the shrine, and left. Time has come. I need to stop being such a wimp. Hinata said as she left the Hyuga compound and went to her secret training ground, stop chasing useless dreams and do something. The old Hinata was too weak, too shy, and too feeble to do anything. I won't think twice any longer. She looked at the swords and nodded to herself. I will be a shinobi of Konoha, she said. She said, these will show who the new Hinata is, and then went to work with a cold determination. Soon, the elemental nations would shake because 2 demons were being born. Naruto stood up with a soft groan. It took him 2 days to be able to move, but when he could, he slowly made his way to a table in the room where he had been lying. A big bowl and a pitcher of water were there. He slowly poured some water into the bowl, and then he splashed some water on his face and arms. He sighed as he looked at the water, then took a few drops in his hands and drank them. A voice from behind him said, finally up and about. He turned around and saw Aragon there. When he took off his cloak, he had gray hair with a few light brown strands. His hazel eyes were always up to something, but behind them was sadness. He had a rough gray beard and mustache on the bottom half of his face. His clothes were a rough dark red long-sleeved shirt and a lightweight black leather jerkin. His pants were also black, and brown boots covered the bottom of the legs. He had a black cloth wrapped around the palm and back of his right hand, but the fingers were still free. Naruto groaned. So, he asked, can I ask questions now? As he turned, Aragon smiled. You can, over a hearty meal. "Come with me," he said as he left the room. Naruto went after them slowly and looked around. When he saw that the room and hallways were cut out of the rock, he asked, "How did you do all this?" There were no bumps or rough spots on the walls. Aragon grinned. As they walked into a large room, he said, "That will be part of my story to you." There was a rough wooden table and a few chairs in the middle. There was a fireplace along one wall with a black pot sitting on top of a roaring fire. Naruto stopped to smell the kettle when he smelled something good. He asked, with his mouth almost watering, "What is that?" Aragon laughed as he moved the food around in the pot. "A simple stew with beef, whatever vegetables and herbs I could find, and a few other things, along with fresh bread and good beer," he said as he put 2 bowls of stew on the table with a large plate of bread and 2 mugs of a brownish amber liquid. Naruto's mouth was watering, so he reached for a nearby spoon. He took it in his hands and looked at it. He asked, "What's this?" Aragon sighed as he went to get his own. "It's called a spoon, and you eat with it," he said, using his stew as an example. Naruto did the same thing and then ate the stew quickly. Aragon tore the bread in half and put his half in the stew. Before reaching for the mug, Naruto did the same. He took a look at the drink and a sip of it before coughing and sputtering. "What is that?" he asked, his voice still hoarse from coughing. Aragon shrugged. He said, "It's beer, and a pretty plain one at that. It has more flavor than the alcohol most people here drink, though." Naruto's eyes got really big, and he looked at the mug. He asked, "You mean this is like sake?" Aragon nods. "Yeah. And before you tell me I'm a kid, think about it. Your village trains you to do what should be an adult's job. So, you're treated like an adult. Old enough to kill, old enough to drink, though a nice mulled wine would have been better," he said as he took a big sip from his mug. Naruto looked at the mug and drank some more from it. He coughed again, but the taste was good. He turned around. He went back to his stew and asked, "So, what's your story?" Aragon was quiet for a few minutes before he put his back against the wall. "Hello, my name is Aragon, and I'm a simple wanderer and explorer of these lands. I'm not from this continent, though. I'm from a land to the east, across the ocean, and it's called Algesia." He looked at Naruto. "So, you crossed the ocean and went to the east. Why?" Aragon didn't say anything for a while as he looked at his food. "Let's just say that there was nothing left to keep me there. I was a warrior fighting in a big war against an evil king. When the war was over, I stayed long enough to help the new queen get things under control, and then I left." Naruto nodded as he continued to eat and drink. He asked, "Is that all? It's a little short on details." Aragon looked up, and his eyes got more serious. "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to tell a stranger my whole life story. You already know what you need to know," he said with a growl. Naruto opened his mouth to fight back, but something about the way Aragon looked at him made him stop. He looked at his food and said, "Sorry." Aragon let out a sigh and sat down. "It's okay. Just some things in my life are sensitive, okay? So, what about you? I was able to get some information from your mind. I know your name is Naruto Uzumaki, genin of Konohagakure no Sado, and I know about the Kyuubi inside of you, but that's about it." Naruto looked at him and then let out a sigh. "Why should I tell you more? You already know enough about me from that, don't you?" Aragon's eyebrow went up. "Ah, you used my own excuse against me. That's impressive. I was just wondering, though. A lot of your mind feels clouded with loneliness and pain. I was wondering how someone so young could feel that way." Naruto looked at him, and he felt like this man was someone he could trust. So he took a small sip of the beer, coughed a bit at the taste, and sat back. "My story is simple. On my birthday, the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. The Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze, fought the beast but couldn't kill it. So, he sealed the fox inside me, giving his life in the process. After the attack, both of my parents died, so I was put in an orphanage. The Yondaime wanted me to be seen as a hero, but the villagers only saw the Kyuubi. The Sandaime Hokage, who was the Yondaime's predecessor, made a law that said no one could say the truth about me. It didn't stop people from hating me, though. I lived in the orphanage for 6 years, until they kicked me out. Then, Aragon just laughed this off. It sounds like the villagers are really stupid, and the Sandaime didn't really help you that much. Naruto barked and jumped up. Don't insult him. He took care of me and helped me figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Aragon put up his hands to show he was giving up. Fine, fine. It just seems to me that if he was the leader of your village, he should have been able to help you more. Instead, from what I can tell, he barely helped you at all. Naruto just let out a growl and got up from the table. He was leaving the dining room when he said, "I'm done here." Aragon looked up and sighed when he was done eating. Naruto was looking for his gear and equipment all over the place. This cave was just a confusing maze of rooms. He growled and kicked a wall, but his leg hurt, so he leaned down and rubbed it. He's a jerk. He didn't know anything about what he was talking about. Kyuubi replied, "Stupid human." Of course he did. That pathetic shell of a man couldn't do a damn thing to help protect you from the hatred of the villagers. It's a wonder you didn't die before your first birthday. Naruto just growled at the fox and pushed it away as he limped down the halls. He stopped when he got close to two doors that were facing each other. He started to go to the one on his right, but stopped when he felt a pull in his mind and heart that told him to go through the other door. Slowly, he turned around and moved toward it, wondering what this feeling was. He opened the wooden door slowly and walked inside. The only things in the room were a pair of lanterns that lit it and a stone pedestal in the middle. There was a cushion and two rather large stones on the pedestal. One was a dark blue that made him think of the ocean. The other, on the other hand, was very dark. Almost like a void. As soon as he looked at it, he felt the pull get stronger. It was almost like he heard a voice telling him to go there. He moved slowly toward it. Inside Naruto's mindscape, Kyuubi could feel power coming off of both stones. A power that the Biju had never felt or seen before. It's mesmerizing. When Naruto got to the pedestal, he looked at the black stone slowly. It was about 1.5 to 2 feet long and 9 inches wide. The surface looked smooth and free of any marks or flaws. He lifted his right hand slowly and touched it gently. He pulled back when he felt a small tingle in his hand. Aragon looked up from his food when a tingling feeling started to move up his bandaged hand. He looked at the exit before getting up and walking down the halls until he came to the door Naruto had just opened. He stepped through and saw Naruto standing there, staring at the stone he had touched. "Aren't they beautiful?" he asked simply. Naruto jumped and spun around. "I'm sorry, I was looking for my stuff in." Aragon asked with a small smile on his face, "And then you felt a pull on your mind that led you here, right? To that black stone?" Naruto slowly nodded, and Aragon's grin grew wider. He said, "Well, nothing bad happened, but I'd like you to stay here for a few days so I can make sure you're fully healed. After that, I have an offer for you." Naruto looked at him and then made a mean face. "Why should I stay? You made fun of someone I care about, so why should I?" Aragon groaned. He said, "I'm sorry about that. I guess we had different ideas, but I won't do it again." Naruto slowly nodded. "Fine. I'll stay long enough to make sure I'm ready to go, and then I'll go home after hearing this offer. Now, where's the room I was staying in? And my stuff?" Aragon smiled as he led Naruto to the other room, gave him his stuff, and then led him back to the room he had been staying in. Aragon said, "If you're interested, I've put together a big library over the years. It's to the left of this room, 3 rooms down." Then he left. As Naruto lay on his bed, he sighed. He closed his eyes and said, "That guy's weird." The Kyuubi was thinking about that power it had felt inside Naruto's mind. So much power. If I could add it to mine, I would. Maybe. I might be able to get away from this stupid person. Yes. Then I could do what I had planned and destroy Konoha. The Kyuubi no Kitsune closed its eyes with a happy laugh and went to sleep, dreaming of the day it would destroy Konoha. Otogakure no Sato. So. They didn't bring the Kyuubi kid in for testing? A voice hissed in anger. The voice belonged to a white man with long black hair and golden eyes with pupils that looked like snakes. He was wearing a cream-colored shirt with short sleeves and a black shirt with long sleeves underneath. He also had on baggy black pants and a purple rope tied in a bow around his waist. This man was Orochimaru, the Otokage and a rogue snake Sannin from Konoha. His right-hand man, Kabuto Yakushi, was on his knees in front of him. The younger man had silver hair and wore purple pants and a purple shirt with gray sleeves. His auto headband was tied around his forehead, and he moved his glasses up his nose with his fingerless gloves-clad hands. Yes, Orochimaru-sama. It seems that when Naruto killed one of our Chunin, his brother was angry and threw him off a cliff with several explosive tags. None of the group survived or got away, as Jiraiya killed everyone except the Chunin in charge of the group that went after Naruto, Kabuto said while still on his knees. Orochimaru sighed and put his feet up. Well, that's a shame. I would have liked to try out the Kyuubi's chakra, but there's no point in crying over spilled milk. Kabuto nodded as he moved on to the next part of his report. Neither of these two shinobi knew that a third person was listening to them talk. This person was a male teenager, about the same age as Naruto. He wore a white hakama that was a little bit open, black pants, and sandals. He wore the same kind of belt with a sword and scabbard hidden in the back. This was Sasuke Uchiha, the only person who lived through the Uchiha massacre in Konoha about 6 years ago. The Sharingan, the Uchiha clan's Kekai Genkai, was known for being able to copy an enemy's jutsus, hypnotize them, and predict their movements. Itachi, his older brother, was the one who killed the clan and left only Sasuke alive. Sasuke had promised to get revenge for his clan by killing Itachi one day. About a year ago, Orochimaru gave Sasuke the chance to become powerful. Power enough to kill his brother. Sasuke had left Konoha because he didn't feel like he was getting the power he needed there. He also felt like he was being overshadowed by Naruto's continued growth in strength. Konoha couldn't let the last member of a respected clan leave, of course. To stop him, a group of genin led by Shikamaru Nara, the new Chunin, was sent. They were stopped by Orochimaru's forces until only Naruto was left to fight Sasuke. Naruto finally caught up with Sasuke in the historic Valley of the End, where the Shodai Hokage, Madara Uchiha, the clan's founder, had fought. Naruto drew on the Kyuubi's chakra to fight Sasuke, who was using new power that Orochimaru had given him. At the end of the battle, Naruto was knocked out and bleeding, and Sasuke could hardly stand. Sasuke was able to get away before more Konoha troops arrived. Sasuke was standing there when he heard that Naruto had died. He slowly made a fist and shut his eyes. Another. Just someone else in my life. Gone. He had only told Naruto this during their fight. He had thought of the blonde guy on his team as his best friend. He had tried to break that bond because he thought it showed weakness. He thought he had done well when he left Naruto in the valley. So why do we feel pain? Is it because Naruto looked like the kind of person I wanted to be? Just happy? He turned to go back to his room to think about how he was feeling and figure out what was going on. Aragon's cave, 4 days later. Naruto smiled as he stretched and felt the movements of his body. There was no pain or even a twinge. Even more, he smiled as he packed up his things and put the fixed pack on his back. He left his room and slowly walked toward what he had called the stone room. Aragon was waiting for him there. He said, "I see you're all packed up and ready to go." As he looked around, Naruto gave a nod. Naruto asked, "You said you had an offer for me?" Aragon nodded and went to the black stone. He said, "These stones aren't just rocks or minerals. They're eggs. Dragon eggs, to be exact." Naruto just looked at him. He said, "Dragon eggs? Are you kidding me? Dragons don't exist in real life." Aragon grinned. "Well, I'm not. Like I said, I'm a wanderer. When I first came to this continent, one of the first places I went was to the archives and libraries in each place I stayed. There, I looked up everything I could, and eventually, I found old records that talked about a time before humans came to this continent. During that time, great dragons roamed this place, just like they did in my home. But as humans settled down and grew, they pushed the dragon. Just take a look." Naruto looked through the book, and as he did, his eyes got bigger. Then he shut it. "Okay, let's say I believe you. So what? What does your offer have to do with these eggs then?" Aragon said, "That one's black. It's easy. Just stay here and watch this egg for the next hour or so," he said as he left the room. "I'll be back soon with some refreshments." Naruto sighed as he set his pack down and leaned against the wall. "This is a waste of my time. I need to get back home." Kyuubi said, "Usually, it doesn't matter to me what you do, as long as it doesn't kill us." But in this case, staying here might be good for us. Naruto cocked his head. Are you sure? Yes, you stupid hairless ape. Think about it. This guy has strength and power. Do you want to keep your promise to bring back the Uchiha? Do you want to be Hokage? Then wait and listen. The Kyuubi huffed before leaving Naruto alone. At that moment, Aragon came back with a tray of fruit, tea, and mugs of beer. He put it on the floor and put 2 pillows there, too. He said, "Come eat with me," as he started to eat. Naruto sighed and put his feet up. They snacked and talked for the next hour. But as the hour came to an end, Naruto's patience was running out. "What are we?" he asked. The black egg squeaked and moved, cutting him off. Aragon grinned. "That," he said as the egg moved and squeaked again. He quickly stood up, took the egg off the pedestal, and put it between himself and Naruto. The blonde Jinchuriki watched as the egg moved and shook, and the noise got louder. Someone or something suddenly broke the egg, and a black, pointed nose popped out of it. Naruto yelled and jumped back when he heard that. Aragon just laughed as the snout went back and the egg kept moving around until it broke and a small black bundle rolled out. Naruto stood there for a few minutes and watched it lie there until it moved, slowly getting up on wobbly legs. The dragon was about as big as a kitten. Its body was made of muscles, and it slowly turned its long neck to lick some liquid off one of its 2 bat-like wings. It moved its head and tail slowly as it looked around. Its back was covered with small spikes, but there was a space where the neck, shoulders, and back met. The dragon's claws were also black and had sharp points. The dragon spread its wings and yawned, showing small, sharp white teeth in its mouth. Gold eyes that looked like reptile eyes looked up at Naruto in a curious way. Naruto took a look. Is that really a dragon?" he asked, dumbfounded. Aragon just nodded. He laughed as the baby dragon stumbled over to Naruto. "Yes, it's a baby dragon," he said. "It might be the first one born in over 1,000 years." It sniffed his leg and then looked up at him with curious eyes. Naruto couldn't help but smile as he slowly lowered himself and put out his hand. The dragon put its head up and started sniffing his head before making a small noise. Naruto smiled and put a light touch on the animal's head. His arm hurt like hell, and then the pain spread to the rest of his body. He screamed, fell on his back, and shook as burning fire rushed through his veins and seemed to burn his soul. Kyuubi also screamed in pain from inside of him. After what seemed like hours but was probably only a minute or 2, he stopped shaking and just lay there shaking and breathing. Slowly, he moved his numb limbs. He gasped and lifted his head enough to see Aragon and the dragon, which seemed curious as it nudged his side with its head. Aragon slowly got up, walked over, and took Naruto's hand, which had touched the dragon. He slowly raised it so Naruto could see the palm. On it, a white oval that sparkled had shown up. "This, my young friend, is the mark of a dragon rider. It shows up when a dragon has chosen someone they want to connect with, someone they feel destined to be with." He pointed to the dragon that had climbed on Naruto's chest and was curled up looking at him. "This dragon was one of 2 eggs I found in a nest high on a mountain. I don't know what happened to the parents, so I took both eggs to care for them. If I'm right, dragons from this land moved to the east and settled in my country, Algesia, long ago, before anyone wrote anything down." Naruto just looked at him. "What are you saying?" Aragon groaned. He took off the wrappings from his right hand and showed Naruto the same symbol. "Where I come from, humans aren't the only species. We have elves, dwarves, and a race of warriors called Urgles. However, dragons are the ones who claim the land of Algesia. Before humans came, there was a huge war between dragons and elves, who live in forests and have a power called magic, which is like your chakra. During the war, a young elf named Aragon found a dragon egg. The egg hatched for him, and a bond grew. That was the first rider. Aragon and his dragon, Bidom, made treaties between elven and dragon kind. Eventually, a number of eggs were given to the elves, and the dragons waited until they found the one they felt destined for. The eggs would hatch, and an unbreakable bond would be born. When you touched that egg 3 days ago, the dragon inside knew you were the one he or she was meant to be bonded to." Naruto just looked at the little dragon as it yawned and laid its head down on his chest. "So, this dragon is bound to me, and you are also one of these riders?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Aragon took a step back and sighed. I was one. Saphira, my dragon, was killed in a big war. She died protecting me, he said as he turned away and stopped looking at her. Naruto groaned. I'm sorry, but I don't really like this. I mean, you just gave me a responsibility I didn't ask for. Is this how my life is going to be from now on? Aragon turned around, his face a mask of anger and frustration. Don't you get it? You have the chance to bring a new age to this continent. There is no order or peace, only constant war or cold wars. But you have been given the chance of a lifetime. You can change everything in this world. You'll have the power to make a difference and bring peace and balance to these countries. Naruto stopped because he thought of something Jiraiya had told him in the past. Flashback. As they watched the sun go down, Jiraiya smiled at Naruto. I believe that one day we will all be able to live together in peace. All it takes is one person to stop the cycle of war. Naruto just looked at him. Do you think it could really happen? Jiraiya just shrugged. I sure hope so. Flashback is over. Naruto shook his head, then looked up at Aragon as he carefully picked up the dragon, sat up, and held the baby dragon to his chest. He asked, but I'm just one person. What can I do? Aragon groaned. One person's choice can change the world in ways we can't even imagine. Naruto just looked at the baby dragon and then looked up at him. Can I do this? I mean, I'm an outcast. I was the last person in my class. Why would I be this big important hero? Aragon joined him and sat down. Let me tell you something. When I was 15, almost 16, I was just a farm boy, and a huge war was going on to the south. Then my dragon's egg came to me, and I ended up being the only hope for an entire land's freedom. You don't have to be powerful, strong, or famous to be a hero. You just have to know what is right and be willing to do it. Naruto looked at the small dragon from below, and then he looked up. What did you propose? Aragon smiled. Let me teach you how to be a dragon rider. I'll teach you everything I know. Then you can do whatever you want, go home or do good things all over the world. Do you agree? He held out his hand to Naruto. Naruto looked at the little dragon and then up at Aragon. If I can find the strength. Strength enough to find Sasuke and bring him home. Agreed. He said, shaking Aragon's hand. Okay, first things first. We need to talk about what you'll learn, and trust me, it's a lot. First, you'll need to learn the ancient language that was spoken in Algesia and that the elves brought back with them when it had been forgotten. This language is important to your powers as a dragon rider. You'll also need to learn how to care for your dragon and how to fight with it. Naruto just looked at him. Wow. Aragon chuckled. A lot, I know. Oh, and you'll need to learn how to use magic. But that won't happen until you know the basics of the ancient language, and then you have to make it come out before you can access it. Naruto groaned. Fine, fine. So what should I do with this little guy? He asked, pointing to the sleeping dragon. Aragon went over to see what the dragon was like. He said, actually, you should ask what to do with this little girl. That's a female dragon. Naruto looked at the dragon in front of him. Fine. What do I do? For now, just feed her. Tomorrow, we'll go outside to spar and do physical training. After that, we'll get to schoolwork. Naruto did nothing but nod until Kyuubi spoke up. You know, you could just use the Shadow Clone Jutsu to learn everything you need to know about this language. Every time one breaks up, you get the memories back. Really? Naruto asked. Kyuubi just sighed. Yes, you worthless rat. Geez, you're supposed to be the master of the jutsu, and you don't even know half of what it does. Naruto sighed as Kyuubi went back into its cage. Naruto said with a smile, I just remembered something. When I use the Shadow Clone Jutsu, I get memories of everything they learn, so I can use them to help me in school. Aragon's eyes went wider. You lucky jerk. I wish I could have done that with my teacher. It would have made things easier for me. Naruto just chuckled. Your sensei was strict with you? Aragon's eyes got blurry as he thought about the past. He shook his head. Both of them, being a dragon rider is no joke. It takes hard work and dedication. Anyway, go rest. You'll need it, I'm sure, he told him, and Aragon went down to the library. Naruto carried the little dragon back to his room and put it on his bed. He let out a sigh as he watched it yawn, stretch, and blink at him. Slowly, the dragon got up and opened his mouth, making a squeaking sound. Naruto was happy. He gently stroked its head and said, "If you're hungry, I'd better get you something to eat." He then went to the dining room or kitchen. He got some of the meat that Aragon had shown him while he was there. It had been dried and treated to make it last as long as possible. He got a few strips and went back to his room, but when he got there, he stopped. The little black dragon, which was about the size of his forearm, was chewing on the dead body of a rat that was almost the same size as it. Blood was on its nose and claws, but because it was black, it was hard to see. It looked up at him, squeaked, and then dove back into the water. He did nothing but stand there. "Wow," he said. "It's amazing that it's only a few days old and already a natural hunter," Kyuubi said. Naruto sat down and gently rubbed the back of the dragon. He stopped because his mind was being pulled by something. A presence in his mind that was almost like a question. He looked down and saw the dragon blinking at him. He gave the presence a gentle push and the dragon's head moved. Sounds like you," he asked. Naruto raised an eyebrow as the dragon's head seemed to tilt. He said, "I think things are getting more and more interesting." Hidden cave. In a cavern filled with crystals, the spirits of 9 people showed up. 8 of them looked at the 9th person, who had spiky hair and gray eyes with rings around the pupil. "I have bad news for my fellow Akatsuki members. It was recently found that the Kyuubi no Kitsune's container was attacked by shinobi under Orochimaru's command. It is thought that Orochimaru died and took the Kyuubi with him." They all woke up. "Are you positive?" The ring-eyed one gave a nod. "For the most part. The body was never found. We will focus on the rest of the ones we haven't caught yet: Sasori, Deidara, Hidan, and Kakuzu. Ichibi and Nibi can wait. For now, start scouting around Otto. We won't let this change our plans. When the time is right, we will strike." A short, stocky figure, a tall figure with a ponytail, another figure with green eyes, and a man with slicked back hair and a 3-bladed scythe all nodded and bowed before their projections disappeared. The man looked at 2 other people. "Kisame, Itachi, I want you 2 to go get the Ranbi. He has been found in the southern parts of the land of Earth." Both the tall man with the big thing on his back and the man with the red eyes and 3 black tomos nodded and walked away. "As for you, Zetsu, I want you to start looking for any hints about where the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's body might be. I need to know for sure if he is dead or alive." A man who looked like he had a giant Venus flytrap around his head nodded and left. The man sighed and then looked at the last figure, which looked like a woman with a rose in her hair. "It's not going the way it should, Conan. Pain-sama, maybe this isn't the right thing to do. Maybe we should try to find another way," the woman, who was now known as Conan, said with some hesitation. Pain gave a slight nod. "This is the only way, Conan. The only way for peace to come to the world is at the point of a sword. Our sword. I thought you knew that after what happened, but I guess you didn't." Conan looked away. "You're right. I was wrong." Pain said, "I forgive you. Trust me, Conan. Trust me like you always have." When Conan nodded, the 2 of them went away. The next morning, when the sun was just coming up, Naruto was already outside, at the bottom of the canyon, stretching his muscles to get ready for training. He was wearing a plain white t-shirt with a red swirl pattern, just like the one on his old jacket and the flak vests that the Chunin and Junin of Konoha wore. His orange and black pants were also on. Aragon was standing nearby and watching him, and the baby dragon was curled up on a rock with its gold eyes fixed on Naruto. Aragon nodded. "Okay, here's how you'll train. Every morning before breakfast, you'll start your physical training. At the same time, I want 10 of your clones to be in the library I've set up, studying the ancient language. I've written many scrolls and books over the years to teach people how to read, write, and speak the ancient language." Naruto nodded, then made the right number of clones and sent them back into the caves. Aragon nodded. "Every day, I want you to do 250 push-ups, sit-ups, squat thrusts, and chin-ups. As time goes on, I'll increase the number. You'll also jog the length of this canyon, which is 3 miles in either direction from this point. You'll jog down to one end, then back, then down to the other end, then back. Since you're a shinobi, you'll eventually do this while running on the river. Naruto nodded, but he was still worried about what was going to happen. Aragon grinned. Once all that is done, I'll teach you the way of the sword. Then, you can have breakfast. After that, I'll teach you things that are best learned by doing, like smithing and taking care of your dragon. At the end of the day, you'll spend 2 hours carrying water from the river here up to the top of the cliff, where I've made a basin in a boulder. You can only carry the water with your hands. Naruto's eyes got really big. He yelled, what? That's impossible. Aragon snarled, and his eyes got more serious. He told her, trust me, you will do it. That training will come in handy, and it's much better than what I did. Aragon just gave him a shrug as Naruto just stared at him. He told her, you'll end the day with another workout, and then you can go to bed. He yelled, well, don't just stand there. Get to work. Naruto just stared at him for a moment before making a growling sound and getting down to do push-ups. As he began, he said under his breath, crazy weirdo sensei. He felt something heavy on his back, and when he looked up, he saw that Aragon had put several heavy things on him. I forgot, he said as he sat next to Naruto's dragon and motioned for Naruto to put on the weights. You'll be doing all of this while wearing these 50-pound weights. I wish I had them when I was training. They'll help you get used to wearing armor. Naruto grumbled as he put on weights for his ankles, bracers, and a vest that weighed 100 pounds. Then he went back to work, grunting as he lifted his heavier body off the ground. As Aragon looked at the small black dragon, he just laughed. Well, I guess this will be fun, don't you think? He asked. The dragon did nothing but yawn and stretch. Naruto worked out for 2 hours because the weights made it hard for him to move quickly. He was sweating and breathing hard when he got back. He fell to the ground and took deep breaths when a sword-shaped branch of wood fell next to him. He looked at it and then up at Aragon, who was holding another branch. He said, well, pick it up. Naruto just groaned. He stood up and said, I can hardly move. Give me a chance to breathe. At that moment, Aragon hit him in the head with his stick. He yelped in pain and jumped up, grabbing his stick to block Aragon's next blow. Aragon hit Naruto on the shins as he spun around and said, you think an enemy will wait for you to catch your breath? An enemy would kill you any chance they get. You must be ready to fight at any time. Naruto snarled and swung the branch at Aragon, but the older man wasn't there. When Aragon's branch hit him in the stomach, it woke him up. Aragon's stick hit him in the back when he bent over to try to catch his breath. Aragon's stick was pointed at his neck when he fell to the ground. He moved away and said, you're dead. Again. Naruto slowly got up and used his staff to help him. Hey, would you give a guy a chance? Naruto asked. Aragon's answer was to hit Naruto's free hand, which made the blonde scream in pain. If you wanted to be coddled during your training, you should have stayed in Konoha. This is the real world, so deal with it, the former dragon rider said as he got into his fighting stance. Aragon sighed and put up a hand as Naruto did the same thing. Wait. First of all, your stance is all wrong. You need to spread your feet out. Second, stop holding your arms so stiffly. If I hit hard enough, I could break the bones. Keep a grip on your sword, but keep your limbs loose enough so that when you block, the energy is absorbed through your weapon and your limbs. This way, it dissipates. Attack now. Naruto made a hard lunge and swing. Aragon just pushed it to the side and hit him in the arm. Too much anger. This is a sword, not a hammer. Attack. Naruto snarled and attacked again. This time, Aragon blocked, caught his wrist, and twisted it, which made Naruto drop the stick. Aragon poked him in the chest hard with his own stick, sending him flying back into the river. Aragon sighed as Naruto stumbled up. He threw Naruto his training stick and said, we have a lot of work to do. By the time they were done, the sun was out and shining bright. When Naruto limped into the dining room and sat down, he was covered in bruises, bumps, and small cuts. Aragon was pulling him up almost right away. He told the boy, hold on, we're not done yet. Go wash up and change into some other clothes, and then I'll teach you how to cook. Naruto groaned as he slowly limped out of the room and down the hall to a room where Aragon had set up a hot spring bath. He moaned in pain as he slowly took off his clothes and slid into the water, only wearing his boxers. I'm going to die because of this guy. He said. Kyuubi's voice told him in his head, "Stop whining. Nothing worth getting is easy, is it?" He just gave a soft growl as he moved his body and winced. About 20 minutes later, he walked slowly into the kitchen. Most of his wounds were already getting better or were already gone. Aragon nodded as he walked in. "Okay, let's start off easy today with eggs, bacon, and coffee," he said as he made his own breakfast to show Naruto what to do. Then he sat down and started eating while Naruto tried to make the same food. His dragon was busy eating a bird that it had caught by surprise. The end result of Naruto's work wasn't something you'd want to serve to someone else, but it wasn't a total failure, either. So, after he ate, he sighed as he followed Aragon through his cave mansion. Aragon opened a door that was pretty big and led into a big room. The fire and anvil in the middle of the room took up most of the space. There was a barrel of water close by. There were hammers, chisels, tongs, and other tools for making tools and weapons all over the room. A big bellows helped keep the fire going. Along one wall, Naruto saw a suit of armor he had never seen before. There was a big shirt that looked like it was made of hundreds or thousands of small metal rings that were linked together. The same metal rings were also used to make a type of hood, a leather cap, and a gold and silver helmet. Next to them were bracers made of metal, leather gloves with rings like armor, greaves, and a large shield with an oak design on it. But it was the sword that really caught his eye. It was a sword with a long blade and a dark blue sheath. The end of the scabbard was topped with a leaf-shaped piece of metal, and metal vines wrapped around the point where the crossguard of the blade met the scabbard. The crossguard of the sword was curved in blue. The hilt seemed to be made of a black material, and a blue sapphire was held in place by 4 metal pieces that looked like ribs. Aragon smiled as Naruto turned to look at him. "My old armor. And my sword, Brysinger." As he said the strange word, the fire in the forge seemed to get hotter, and a glow surrounded the sword. Naruto felt a strong power that went away quickly. Aragon went to get his armor. "I've been all over this land, and no one uses armor like my people do. This is chainmail, a light, flexible armor that can bend under slashing attacks and catch arrows and other ranged weapons," he said. Naruto put a soft hand on it. "Wow. It seems to be so light." Aragon nodded. "Yes, and it will be one of the things you learn to make," he said as he walked past the anvil. On the other side, a hanging cloth separated a room from the hallway. Aragon moved it out of the way to find big piles of metal, wood, and charcoal. "This is where I keep the tools for forging and the wood for the fires," he said softly as he moved to the back to check something that was covered. He turned around, looked at Naruto, and left. He said, "Now, there are some rules here. Do what I say, don't mess around, don't joke around, and be careful with everything." Naruto nodded, and Aragon started to explain and show him how to use the different tools and forging methods. Naruto just stood there and listened carefully. Every so often, he asked Aragon a question, which Aragon answered. Aragon nodded when he was done explaining. He said, "Right, so tomorrow we'll start with you making a long knife and then move on." Naruto nodded eagerly. He asked eagerly, "Then I'll get to make a cool sword like yours, right?" Aragon sighed and then tapped Naruto on the head. "If that's how you're going to act, no. Forging isn't just about the end result. If you don't pay attention during the process, the end result will be bad. Now pay attention." Aragon took a breath and Naruto nodded. He said, "Now, go get your dragon and meet me outside. We need to talk about how to take care of her and other things." Naruto quickly ran back to the dining room, where his dragon was curled up near the fire. He took her in his arms with care. She slowly opened one eye, yawned, and then put her head back down. Naruto took her outside, where Aragon was already waiting with lunch and a few books. Aragon started talking as Naruto sat down and the dragon slowly moved toward the food. "Before we start, you need to know a few things. That dragon is not just a dumb beast of burden. She is a sentient being, just like you and me. If anything, she will be smarter than both of us." Naruto gave the dragon a scratch on the back as he slowly nodded. Aragon continued. "Dragons were the first people to live in Algesia and on this continent. Their history goes back to the beginning of this land, and they are deeply connected to both magic and nature. Dragons can live for a very long time, grow quickly, and get very big. They come in many colors, but each one is different, just like each person is different. Because they are magical creatures, they can sometimes do magic, but it is usually random and hard to control. Finally, when a dragon hatches for a rider, a bond is made. She will be able to feel your emotions, read your thoughts, and talk to you through your mind. This bond is what gives a rider the ability to use magic. It will also make you live longer, making it likely that you will never die of old age. However, you can still die from poisons, weapons, and possibly illness. 1. Because of this bond, if you die, so will she. Naruto slowly looked down at the little dragon, who looked up from the meat she was eating, let out a squeak, and then went back to eating the meat. Naruto slowly raised his eyes. He shouted, "But why? That doesn't seem fair. She should die because of me." Aragon just grinned. "So, you care about her? That's good, that's very good. It means you will treat her well. Unfortunately, there's no way out of this, Naruto. But don't worry, the demon in you makes it even harder for you to die," he said with a smile. Naruto slowly nodded, and Aragon started to teach him what he needed to know to take care of his dragon. Scale rot is being fixed, and her claws are being cleaned. What plants would make her sick or make her feel better? How they mate, what they eat, and other things. Naruto nodded as he gently stroked the back of his dragon. He felt a small tap on the back of his head, and he turned to see the dragon pawing at his leg. He slowly picked her up, and she wiggled a little before climbing onto his arm and then onto his shoulder. She put her arms around his neck and made a happy noise. Aragon and Naruto both laughed at this, and Naruto scratched her chin slowly. He told her, "She's really cute." Aragon nodded. He said, "Yeah, they're cute now, but wait until she's 2 months old. By then, she'll be bigger than you. Also, you need to help her learn how to understand what you're saying. I know you can feel a connection to her right now. All you need to do is let yourself be open to it. That's one way you'll be able to talk to her." Naruto looked at his dragon and gave a slow nod. When she looked at him, he felt like she was digging into his mind. Slowly, he let it in, and it almost felt like his soul was going to leave his body. As Naruto reached out to her mind, the dragon moved and looked around curiously. Hi?" The dragon looked at him and cocked her head to the side. Naruto shook his head nervously and laughed nervously. I'm Naruto, and I guess you're my dragon?" he asked. Naruto smiled as the dragon tucked her head under his chin. Aragon nodded. "Good, I can tell you've connected. Now, for the next few hours, I'm going to..." Aragon stopped as he began to wheeze and then cough so hard that he doubled over. Naruto was scared and got up to help him. He asked the teacher, "Sensei, are you okay?" Aragon took in a lot of air as the coughing stopped. He slowly stood up and said, Mostly. I'm okay." As I was saying, he continued, "I want you to talk to her, tell her things, and show her some of your memories, and not the bad ones, but the ones that will help her learn." Naruto slowly nodded. "Are you sure you're okay? That coughing was pretty bad." Aragon just told him to go away. As he left, he said, "I'm fine." As he walked away, Naruto just smiled. He said, "So, let me tell you about the wonders of ramen." The dragon turned her head to look at him. Naruto talked for the next few hours about anything that came to mind. Even though he left Konoha, he never forgot his friends or his life there. He also talked about things as simple as trees, food, animals, and other things like that. His dragon did nothing but sit there and listen. And Naruto gave a grin. He smiled because no one had ever just listened to him before. Well, someone did. I really don't get her, you know? I mean, she's always so quiet, and she's always red and fainting. I think she gets sick easily or something, you know. But it's like, she's always trying to help me. And she actually has the same Nindo as me, you know? It's cool. And she's really strong too, even though she doesn't know it. Like when she saved me from those bug users. Or when she beat." The dragon was humming softly, almost like a cat purring. Naruto just smiled and leaned back against the tree they were sitting under. "Yeah, Hinata Hyuga is strange, but she's very nice. Training Ground 8 in Konoha." Kiba was lying on the ground, panting hard and holding his arm, which was a little bit bleeding. He looked up at the person he was fighting with. "Geez, don't you think you could just take it easy? We're teammates." His partner's eyes were cold and lavender. This is the world of shinobi. Get used to it, Hinata said as she turned and put her kunai back in its sheath. Nearby, Kurenai worriedly watched Hinata. She had seen how Hinata had changed, and it hurt her very much that Hinata had become the perfect Hyuga. When she came back from a short trip, she had lost her coat and everything else that made her who she was. She had turned out to be very cold and sure of herself. Her Jukin was perfect, and her skills as a shinobi got a lot better. But Kurenai would gladly give all of that back if it meant she could have the Hinata she knew and treated like a daughter when she wasn't her sensei. Hinata moved away from Kiba, and Shino went toward him to help. Kurenai was on his way to Hinata. She told him, "That was impressive, but remember that Kiba is on your team. You don't have to fight him like he's an enemy." Hinata looked at Kurenai, and Kurenai hesitated when she looked at him with a cold look in her eyes. She asked, "Excuse me, Kurenai-sensei, but aren't we shinobi? Don't we put our lives in danger every time we accept a mission? How will sparring where we don't hurt each other help us out in the field?" Kurenai did nothing but sigh and shake her head. "Hinata, this isn't about being a good shinobi. It's about how sad you are over Naruto's death and how you're taking it out on other people, and..." "Don't finish your thought, Kurenai-sensei. What happened here is not me taking out my pain on others. It's about me being a real shinobi and a real Hyuga. There's no time for silly crushes or being a weak, shy, stuttering thing. What matters is being strong enough to protect your teammates, protect the client, or complete the mission. Now if you'll excuse me, I have my own training to do." Hinata turned and walked away from Kurenai, who was stunned and hurt. The Junin with the red eyes lowered her head and shook a little. "Naruto. If only you had known how much that girl cared about you." She thought this as Hinata picked up the wrapped package she always carried with her and disappeared into the trees. The Konoha Genjutsu mistress sighed and looked at Kiba and Shino. Jiraiya, who was sad, was sitting in a bar with a half-empty bottle of sake and a few empty bottles on the bar in front of him. He slowly looked up while still drunk. "You know, I taught Minato everything he knew. Kami, he had potential. But his son Naruto. That boy. He had even more potential than his father. He could have been the greatest Hokage ever," he said as he took another drink from his bottle. A person nearby growled. "Even if his parents had been Rakudu Sennin, that demon scum is still a demon who should have been killed when he was born." 10 seconds later, the man's broken body was pushed through the bar's wall and out into the streets. After using Rasengan on the normal person, Jiraiya sat down and started drinking again. After exactly 1 minute, 5 Anbu were all around him. The lead Anbu officer, who was wearing a tiger mask, told Jiraiya-sama, "I'm afraid you have to come with us to jail for attacking and killing a civilian." Jiraiya slowly stood up. "Let me tell you something. That guy called Naruto a demon, but I didn't do anything wrong," he said before he passed out from drinking too much. As they took him away, the Anbu let out a sigh. Tsunade, in the meantime, was just sitting in her office and staring into space. She looked at her desk slowly. There was no paper on it at all. "When did I do it?" she thought, but couldn't remember how she had filled it all out so quickly when it came. She turned slowly toward the window and looked out at the village. She whispered, "Why am I even still here?" as she leaned her forehead against the window and let a single tear drop to the floor. The gorge. Naruto grunted as he tried to use chakra to climb the canyon wall and felt water slip through his fingers. When he turned around and saw Aragon sitting nearby and reading a book, he yelled at him. "What's the point?" Aragon didn't even look up. "This training will help you unlock part of being a dragon rider. Just keep going. I won't be able to teach you magic until you fill that basin with water," he said as he continued to read. Naruto just grunted as he climbed back down and went to get more water before trying to climb back up. He was able to get up this time, but he groaned when he found the basin. It was at least 7 feet in diameter and at least 4 feet deep. He put his water in, which made a small, sad, wet spot on the bottom of the basin. As he went back down, he said with a growl, "I'm going to do this forever." He did this for more than an hour and only got a few handfuls, which made a small puddle at the bottom of the basin. When he got to the bottom of the canyon, he was tired. Aragon put his book away. "Enough, that's enough. Finish your workout, take a bath, and then get rid of your clones so they can process the information they've received," he said. "Then we'll find out how useful your cloning technique is." Naruto gave a tired nod and then got to work. He groaned and took deep breaths as his muscles hurt. Aragon just nodded, and his dragon watched him with its head tilted. A few hours later, Naruto was so tired that he almost fell into his bath. He groaned as the water soothed his muscles. His dragon made a weird squeaking sound that was almost like laughter. "Oh, you think it's funny that I feel like I've been run over by a wagon?" Naruto asked. The dragon stopped and lowered her head because she could feel Naruto's frustration and anger. Naruto sighed as he walked over to where she was sitting on the edge of the tub and gently stroked her. He gently tickled her chin and said, "I'm sorry. I'm just tired and hurting." She perked up and gave him a sweet nip on the finger, which made him smile. Kyuubi's voice said, "Ah, how sad." The dragon suddenly stood up and made a small growl. Naruto's eyes got very big. He said, "Hey. I think she can hear you." Kyuubi mumbled. "Of course she can. That bond between you and her seems to extend to me, too, and it makes me sick to see you pet her like she's a cat or something." The dragon growled, and Naruto could feel that Kyuubi was upset through their connection. He laughed. He told her, "Looks like we have something in common." The fox demon just laid its head down, and Kyuubi just snarled at it. "Laugh now. But soon I'll be in charge of your body, and then we'll see what your dragon thinks." Naruto sighed as he laid back in the bath and enjoyed it. When he was done, he got dressed and went to where Aragon and the clones were waiting in the library. Naruto waved them off with a nod, only to fall to his knees when a lot of information hit him at once. As Naruto moaned in pain, Aragon moved next to him. After a while, he slowly got to his feet. He said, "I'm fine. I just got a lot of information at once." Aragon nodded, before stepping back. "Okay, so tell me what you've learned." So, Naruto went through the information and told Aragon about the ancient language words he had learned. Words like, Brin's Gr, for fire, and Aderna, for water. Aragon nodded. "Good. You're learning fast. Keep doing this until you can read and write the ancient language easily." Aragon smiled, and Naruto just nodded his head. "Take a break. You deserve it." Naruto smiled and walked to his room with his dragon around his neck. When he got there, he put the dragon down and fell asleep. What's more? Only the first day. Before he passed out, he thought. 4 months later. Naruto sighed as the water again slipped through his hands. As he started to walk down the cliff, he said to himself, "Kami, I hate this training so much." Naruto had been training with Aragon for 4 months when he started to get used to his new training routine. He could now keep up with Aragon in sparring, even though he rarely hit his sensei and never won a match. He also discovered that he loved to read. He found some poems and stories that Aragon had translated from Elvish. He loved them very much. He had made a pair of knives in the forge. Aragon had looked them over and said they were good, so he had him melt them down and make them again. Now that Aragon had fixed the 2 new knives, they were always on Naruto's belt and never left his side. These knives were longer and stronger than kunai, which meant they would last longer and under more pressure. As Naruto went down the cliff, he looked over at his dragon, who was lying on some rocks and getting some sun. Naruto didn't know that dragons could grow so quickly. By the end of the first week they spent together, the dragon was twice as big as it had been. By the end of the first month, the dragon was only a third as big as he was at the start. The cute squeaks had stopped, and now there were loud, earth-shaking roars. She hadn't breathed fire yet, but Aragon said that most dragons don't do that until they're 6 months old. By the end of the second month, the dragon had actually talked to Naruto through their mental connection. He was stroking its head as it lay next to him. When he looked up to see the sunset, he whispered, "Beautiful." Inside his head, he heard a woman's voice say, "Yes." Before he looked at the dragon, which was looking at the sunset, his eyes got bigger. "Were you the one?" The dragon looked up at him with a smile in its golden eyes and said, "Yes." Naruto just smiled and stroked its neck as he sat back. Aragon then told Naruto that he needed to give his dragon a name. He hadn't had Naruto do it yet because he also wanted to know what the dragon thought about it, since it would be her name. He gave Naruto a list of names that could be used. Naruto and his dragon went through the whole list, but she said no to each one. Naruto has finally decided on a name. He asked, "How's Onyxia?" The dragon laid there for a while, then raised her head and smiled at him. She said, It works, and then laid her head down. As Naruto looked at Onyxia, he smiled. In 4 months, she had grown big enough for him to ride, but he only did so when she asked, because he didn't want her to feel like a pack mule. In the slowly setting sun, he liked her. Her scales were so dark that they seemed to both reflect and absorb the light of the sun. Her teeth, claws, and the spikes on her back were all now very sharp. Her wings had grown a lot, and she could now soar through the air with ease. Naruto thought back to the first time they flew together. Flashback. Aragon put a leather saddle on Onyxia's back, and Naruto watched him do it. He took a step back and gave Naruto a nod. He said, "Well, let's go. We don't have all day." Naruto slowly walked up to the horse and climbed into the saddle. His legs slid into restraints that he and Aragon had set up, and he leaned forward and grabbed a pair of hand grips on the saddle. He gave Aragon a slow nod and then looked at Onyxia. He yelled, "All right, let's go." With a roar, Onyxia spread her wings and gave a strong flap while pushing off with all 4 legs. She kept flapping her wings and getting higher, while Naruto held on for dear life. As they went up, Naruto slowly started to calm down and sit up. When he turned around and saw the land around him, his eyes got bigger. It's incredible," he exclaimed. Onyxia gave him a smile in return. She said, "It is. It is." Naruto put his arms up and felt the air around him move. He felt so free. So pumped up. As they went around the canyon, he let out a happy whoop. Naruto had a big goofy grin on his face when they landed. He shouted, "That was incredible. We have to do that again." Aragon nodded. "I thought that's what you'd say." Flashback is over. Naruto sighed and leaned against Onyxia's side as he sat next to her. "What is this supposed to teach? It's just annoying," he yelled as he slammed his fist into the raised her head and pushed him with her nose. She told Naruto, "Be patient. I know what Aragon is trying to teach you. Just keep trying." Naruto sighed, got back up, and went to the river. He growled as he bent down and picked up the water in his hands. Then he turned around and went back to the cliff. But right as he was about to get there, he tripped over a rock and fell, splashing water all over the ground. Naruto lay there and looked at the water that had spilled. He started to shake because he could feel his anger rising up inside him. As he slowly got to his knees, he also felt something else. He growled and punched the ground as his eyes turned red. He yelled, jumped up, and screamed at the sky. At that moment, a blast of energy engulfed him and shot at the water, making it shoot up into the air and crash into the basin on top of the cliff. The power then went back into Naruto, and he fell down and panted hard. Aragon was standing there and looking at him when he heard footsteps behind him. After a few moments of just staring at each other, Aragon smiled. He said, "You finished the first step of this training. Now I can teach you how to use magic." Naruto just slowly nodded, and then he fell over and fell asleep. Naruto had to rest for a whole day after he used his magic. Aragon then started to explain what this power was and what its pros and cons were. Aragon told them as they sat in the library, every dragon rider can use magic because it comes from the bond between rider and dragon. Naruto just nodded. "Alright, so what can it do?" Aragon shrugged. "Basically, almost everything has limits. The first and most important rule is, don't push yourself too hard. With magic, your body has a limit. If you go over that limit, you die. There are no second chances. If you cast a spell that is too hard for you, you die." Naruto paled. "Aha. Okay. How do I know what my limits are?" Aragon walks toward him. "Well, there's no surefire way to find out what your limits are, but I can tell you this. Any spell you use will usually take the same amount of energy as if you were doing it physically. For example, if you wanted to lift a boulder, it would take the same amount of magic as if you were using your arms and back. So that could be one way to figure out what your limits are." Naruto nods. He asked, "Alright, so how do I do magic?" Aragon nods. "That's where the ancient language comes in. But first, you have to use your magic. Now, I want you to close your eyes and search your whole mind for something that hasn't been there before. It should feel like a lump or wall in your mind. When you find it, break through it and use your magic." Naruto just nodded, then closed his eyes and looked through his thoughts. At first, all he could find were memories and the odd thought. After 10 minutes of trying, he groaned in anger. He said, "I can't find it." Aragon gave a headshake. "Keep on trying." When Naruto did this, he ended up in front of Kyuubi's cage. The big fox made fun of him. The fox said, "This is pathetic. You're too stupid and excited to think clearly. Now, find this power and use it right away." Naruto turned around and his mind started to wander. He went through many doors. Some of them held memories and others held feelings. In the end, he went into a cave where water was dripping on the floor. As he went down, he looked around and was confused. Finally, he came to a wall that looked like it was made of glass, ice, and stone. He could feel the power that had just been going through his body. He put his hand on the wall and tried to find a way through it. There was no way in or out, and it wouldn't move. He screamed in anger and beat his fist against it. He finally took a step back, made a Rasengan with one hand, and hit it against the wall. It blew open, and a huge rush of power pushed him back. Naruto's eyes popped open in the real world, and he gasped as he felt the power flow through him. He said, I think I found it." Aragon nodded, and then he gave a pebble to Naruto. "Raise this up in the air. The spell is Stenar Resa." Naruto looked at the pebble, then used the power he had just felt to say, "Stenar Resa." The pebble flew up and bobbed around in the air for a few seconds before falling back into his hand. Naruto was a little out of breath and noticed that his hand was glowing as he did it. Aragon smiled. "Well done. You've started to use magic. Now, until I tell you otherwise, the time you spent carrying water to that basin will be split. Half of the time, I want you to meditate, reaching out and sensing everything around you. The other half of the time, I want you to keep trying to make that pebble float over your hand. Once you master that, we'll move on to your next lessons in magic." Naruto looked at the pebble and gave a slow nod. He said the words again, and the pebble rose again. Soon after, it fell again as Naruto tried to get a hold of it. He let out a sigh, then did it again. Aragon nodded as he watched. "Remember, don't push yourself. If you train too hard with magic, you will die. Know what your body can handle, and don't go beyond that." Naruto slowly nodded. He put the pebble in his pocket and said, "I'll try, but I usually push the limits." Aragon chuckled. He said, "I see. That's fine for some of your training, but if you push yourself too hard, you'll hurt yourself instead of helping. For now, rest, study, and talk to Onyxia." Naruto nodded, got up, and walked out of the room, leaving a few clones to study. There, Onyxia was lying in the sun. Naruto climbed softly onto her back and sat in the hollow of her neck. Before Onyxia spoke, they stayed like that for a few seconds. "I've been wondering. What will happen when we're done training? Will you go back to Konoha?" Naruto let out a sigh as he thought about this and told her what he thought. "Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I always promised to become Hokage. I said I'd bring Sasuke back to Konoha, so here he is. I have a lot of important people there. But after he trained with Aragon Sensei, I'm starting to wonder if going back would be worth it. I mean, even if I'm not the Hokage, I can protect everyone I care about. And I wanted to be Hokage at first because I wanted to be respected and known. But that's not a good enough reason to be Hokage. I can still keep everyone safe and bring back Sasuke, but it's where I live. Oji-san always told me to take care of my home." Onyxia asked, "Is that what you want, though? Is that what you really want?" He looked at the ground. "I'm not sure." Onyxia let out a puff of dark smoke in a huff. She said, "When you do know, tell me," and then she closed her eyes. Naruto sat back. He began to think about what he and Onyxia had said. When he was young, he would ask the old man what he could do to stop bad people from staring at him. The answer Sarutobi gave was always the same. He had to love the village and its people and look out for them to notice him. Naruto slowly started to wonder whether or not that was true. Now that he thought about it, the old man seemed very eager to try to protect the whole village. Naruto gave a head shake. He finally said, as he leaned back, "Oji-san would never try to trick me. He was always looking out for me." Even so, that train of thought stayed in the back of his mind for the next 6 months as he continued to train. Naruto felt like his training was really starting to pay off as time went on. He noticed that during his fights with Aragon, he was starting to block more of his attacks and get a few of his own in. His workouts were getting less tiring, and his strength and speed were getting a lot better. But Naruto's intelligence was the thing that really grew. Because he always studied, he learned more about things he had never thought he needed or had even heard of before. Naruto had been training for a year when he took the next big step toward becoming a dragon rider. Naruto stood there and watched Aragon while holding the carved stick that he used as a training sword steady in one hand. Aragon was patient as he waited for Naruto to start another fight with him. The blonde dragon rider in training ran at Aragon and quickly struck him in the head. Aragon pushed the blow to the side and went for a faster blow to Naruto's neck, but Naruto moved out of the way. Aragon jumped back when Naruto quickly stabbed him, but he quickly moved forward and cut Naruto in the middle. Before getting ready again, Naruto just barely avoided the attack. Before he ran again, he took a slow breath. He cut at Aragon, but Aragon blocked it. Naruto quickly cut up, knocking the wooden stick out of Aragon's hands. He then turned around and cut down. Aragon leaned back, but not quite as quickly as he could have. The end of Naruto's branch went across Aragon's chest, showing where Naruto would have cut Aragon. Aragon nodded, as he readied himself again. As they faced each other, Naruto did the same thing. They both charged at each other and swung their swords, but Aragon's sword hit Naruto in the left biceps while Naruto just missed Aragon's head. Before they attacked again, the two turned and faced each other. They both hit each other with their swords, and the blow broke the two branches. Aragon smiled and threw away the broken branch. "Now," he said, with a light puff of breath, "you're ready for the next step." Naruto cocked his head. "What's the next step?" Making your." All of a sudden, Aragon doubled over, coughed up blood on the ground. Naruto was right there with him and did what he could to help. Aragon fell on top of him and coughed and breathed heavily the whole time. Onyxia gave a worried huff and ran over to see what she could do to help. Naruto yelled, "Sensei? Aragon? What's wrong?" Aragon pointed to the cave in a weak way. He said, "I inside. Get me. Cough inside." Aragon told Naruto where to go, so Naruto took him inside and led him to a smaller room with healing herbs. Aragon pointed to a bottle that held a black liquid. Naruto put Aragon down, went and got the vial, and then he came back. He asked, "How much?" Aragon took the bottle with difficulty and drank it all before he fell back and stopped coughing. He lay there, taking deep breaths as his chest heaved. Naruto's thoughts turned to Onyxia. "Is everything okay?" "I'm not sure." As he looked at his teacher, Naruto answered. He asked quietly, "Sensei, what's wrong with you?" Aragon looked at him. "I'm dying," he said in a soft voice. Naruto's eyes got very big. What? How? You can't be dying, unless you were poisoned or something." Aragon gave a head shake. "Why, you're wrong. Dragon riders are immune to disease, except for a rare one that lives in this country and feeds on chakra." Naruto's eyes got very big. "But how could it hurt you?" Aragon gave a weak chuckle. "Because magic and chakra are very similar," he said. "If I still had Saphira, our bond would make me immune, but without her, this disease eats away at my chakra, getting stronger and taking more. It's the same with magic. Soon, maybe in a year, maybe in a day, but soon, my magic and my life will be completely gone." He was sitting there. Isn't there something I can do? A spell, a potion, or I could take you to Konoha and... No, I've already tried. The elves and other great healers of Algesia don't know anything about this disease, so they don't have a cure. The doctors here, even Tsunade from your village, don't know how to stop it. All they can do is slow it down, hoping that a cure will be found or that it will go away on its own. He looked at the ground. Onyxia also felt sad. I'm sorry, Sensei. I wish I had the strength to help you." Aragon gave a weak smile. "Don't worry about it. For now, bring me to the kitchen, and we'll talk about the next step in your training." As he helped Aragon stand up and carried him to the kitchen, Naruto nodded. After giving Aragon some water to drink, the blonde started making food for breakfast. He looked up at the sky. "Now," he said as he sipped some water and coughed softly because his throat was still sore from the earlier coughing fit, "your next step is to make your own sword." Naruto looked up. He asked, really? Are you sure I'm ready? I've gotten better at forging, but I don't know if I can do that. Aragon gave a soft chuckle. Well, I'll be there to help you. But yes, you need to make your own sword, and from now on, we'll be sparring with real weapons. Don't worry, he said when he saw Naruto's face when he heard that, there is a spell to blunt the weapons. They'll still be able to break bones and leave bruises, but they won't be able to cut. Naruto slowly nodded. Okay. Do we start tomorrow? Aragon gave a head shake. Yes, this needs to be done soon, and I need to help you with it, he said. Naruto just slowly nodded as he put a bowl of stew in front of Aragon and called for another for himself. Aragon tore into his food right away. He said, okay, now I'll be there to help guide you through the process and step in when I need to. But you have to make the blade, so you can make a sword that fits your style. First of all, he said, your sword style seems to be mostly fast slashes and hacks, but you throw in a few thrusts to change things up and catch your opponents off guard. You also sometimes use your taijutsu. I also noticed that you tend to use longer swords, so you can attack your enemies from a little farther away and keep them from getting close enough to attack you. Naruto nods. Yeah, I think I'll have the upper hand if I can move quickly enough and keep them from attacking me with a longer weapon. Aragon grins. And you do. Unless the enemy is faster than you. Then they can get past your swings and gut you. But I still like your thinking. When they were done, Aragon slowly got to his feet. I need to rest and get my strength back. Keep doing your other forms of training, and we'll start tomorrow when you're done with your physical training. And Aragon kept his word. Aragon took Naruto to the forge room after Naruto had finished training and they had eaten breakfast. Aragon stopped Naruto when he tried to grab one of the heavy leather aprons. No, use your clones to carry the tools, fuel, and raw materials. During the forging process, we need the flames of a dragon for a rider's blade, he said. Naruto just looked at him and then made more than 100 copies of himself. These copies started gathering everything and taking it outside. Aragon had Naruto set up everything, and he asked Onyxia to move some of the bigger boulders and other rocks to make a fire pit and a place to melt the metal ore. After that, he put coal on it while Naruto put the anvil and water trough in place. Aragon nodded. Good. Now, choose the ore for your sword while I start the fire. Don't be in a hurry. The metal of your sword will determine its strength in battle and can affect it during the forging process. Find the metal that you think will work best for your blade, he said as he started putting small branches in the fire pit, smelter. Naruto started to look at each ore and judge it by lifting it to see how strong it was. He finally chose one and moved it away from the others while Aragon started the fire. Aragon added bigger branches to the fire as it grew. He watched the flames and sometimes stirred them. After an hour, when the wood had burned down to coals, Aragon gave Naruto a nod, and Naruto added the metal he had chosen to the fire. Right away, he and Aragon moved to the large bellows on each side and started pumping, which blew fire onto the ore. Aragon stopped after half an hour to put some coal on. They worked on this for a few hours, but Aragon had to stop several times because he was still weak from the attack he had the day before. Aragon finally stopped them because the metal had melted into a pool of liquid that had collected in a trough at the bottom of the smelting pit. He and Naruto started to shovel the coals out and drop them into the water barrel, which showed the metal. Aragon looked up at the sky and said, "We'll wait for it to cool down and get dark, so we can judge the metal better while we work." Naruto looked at him. He asked as they sat down to eat and drink, "Where did you learn all this? Is it part of being a dragon rider?" Aragon smirked. "Yes, I learned the art of smithing from one of the best blacksmiths in Algesia. Runin was an elf lady who was a master smith and made many, if not all, of the rider's swords. She helped me make my own sword, Brisengr. After the war, I went back to the woods of Du Weldenvarden, to their city of Elismera, and studied with her for many months, if not years." Onyxia stopped by. She asked, "Wouldn't it have been easier for me to just melt it with my flames?" About 5 months ago, Onyxia finally breathed fire when she was laughing at Naruto, who had gotten too excited during a fight and ended up with his face in the river and his butt in the air. After that, she started breathing fire whenever she could. She was amazed that she could do this and proud that she was now a full dragon. Aragon smiled when Naruto told him about the question. "I asked Runin the same thing, and she told me what I'm going to tell you. If we did that, we might not have been able to tell when the metal was ready, or it might have been too soft to use at all. As I told Naruto, we will need your flames. Just not yet. Onyxia opened her wings and gave a slow nod. She said as she flew away, then I'll go hunting. Let me know when you need me. As Naruto sat back and talked with his sensei, all he did was nod. As the sun started to go down, the canyon wall blocked it from view, making it dark early in the canyon. Aragon gave a nod to Onyxia, who had just come back from her hunt about an hour before. The black dragon pulled the clump of metal apart and put it on the ground. Aragon nodded. Good. Now, Onyxia, we need to break it up into smaller pieces. The dragon nodded and started to stomp on the metal, breaking it into pieces about the size of a fist. Aragon went through them and put them into 2 groups after she was done. The soft parts will be used in the middle of the blade, which will allow it to bend when it gets hit and keep it from breaking. The hard parts will be used for the cutting edge, which must stay rigid. Aragon put the pieces on the forge, and Naruto gave him a nod. Onyxia got a nod from the former dragon rider. We need your fires now. The dragon smiled and let out a small stream of fire onto the metal pieces. When they all turned cherry red, Aragon told Onyxia to stop right away. Naruto moved forward and started smashing the pieces with a sledgehammer into 1/4-inch thick plates. When he was done beating one, he put it in the water trough. When they were all done, Aragon told him to take them out and use a sandstone to scrape away the black scales that had formed because of how quickly they cooled. After that, the pieces were put back in order. Aragon put his eyes shut. We have a problem. There is more soft metal than hard metal here. We won't have enough for a long sword with 2 cutting edges. Naruto nodded. He said, then let's make it with one. Aragon looked at him before nodding. Okay, let's start with the cutting edge and then move on to the main part. Aragon taught Naruto the spells to strengthen the metal in the sword. At first, Aragon sang them while Naruto learned them and got them right. Then Naruto took over, making the cutting edge of the sword. The next day, while his clones were studying, he and Aragon worked on the sword again. They finished the first stage of the cutting edge and started on the main body of the sword. They also heated, folded, and hammered the softer parts of the sword. Aragon carefully led Naruto and helped him when he needed to. Since the process was slow, Naruto could take his time and make sure he didn't make too many mistakes. By the end of the week, the 2 parts were done, and Aragon told Naruto how to put them together. The cutting edge was folded into a V, and the body of the blade was placed inside the V. The whole thing was heated up, and Naruto hammered the pieces together, helping the blade take its shape. Aragon finally stopped Naruto and told him to finish the shape of the sword by making a series of smaller strikes along key areas. Onyxia helped by shooting small flame bursts over each area. After that was done, Aragon took the finished sword and started to file away the rough edges to give it a clean edge. Naruto looked at him and asked, "What are you doing?" Aragon smiled. You probably want to know why I won't let you do this, right? It's because you don't have the right skills for the delicate work. Yet. You're pretty good at using a hammer and tongs. But you still can't reach the file and draw knife. Do not fret. One day, you'll learn how to use these tools, he said. For now, get the covering ready. Naruto nodded as he mixed up the mixture that would help him control how much heat went to different parts of the blade the next time it was heated. When Aragon was done, he put a coat on the cutting edge of the blade and added more coats to the middle and the other side. He let the whole thing dry before telling Naruto to gently pull the blade through the fire toward him. Naruto did this, then turned the sword over and did it along the other side. He did this again and again until all the right parts of the sword were heated. The blade was then cooled, heated, and doused again. The blade was then polished, and Aragon gave it a nod as he took it. This is a good knife. Of course, it can't even come close to Runin's skills. But you won't find many. He looked at it and said, I don't know of any swords that are as strong or as good at cutting as this one. Then he looked up at the sky and said, Go and rest. This has been hard on you and worn you out. Tomorrow. You'll get your sword tomorrow. Naruto stumbled into the house and slowly nodded. In his mind, he heard Onyxia laugh and say, You're really tired, Naruto. You would have been happy to sleep on broken rocks. Bah. All of this excitement and exhaustion over a piece of steel? Kyuubi growled, If you just used me, you wouldn't have to go through all this. Naruto just sighed. Furball. If you only do it once. Please. Stop it. He yelled, then fell on his bed and fell asleep almost immediately. He never heard Onyxia's roaring laughter or the Kyuubi's angry howls. The following morning, on the 27th day of making, Naruto yawned as he stumbled into the dining room. When he saw Aragon there, he stopped. The older dragon rider smiled and held up a long, wrapped shape. "This," he said, "it's yours." Naruto looked at it and then carefully picked it up. As he took off the wrappings, his hands began to shake, and when the last one fell off, he let out a gasp. He held the sword, which was in a scabbard made of polished and hardened wood. The hilt was also a full foot long and jet black, with silver trimming along the edges. The center of the hilt bulged out, then slimmed down, and then flared out at the pommel in the silver hilt guard. The hilt was wrapped in black leather to make it easier to hold. The scabbard was jet black, with a silver cap at the end and a silver ring around the top, where it met the hilt guard. It was about 3 inches wide and 3.5 feet long, and the end tapered down from the top and came to a point at the bottom. Naruto held the hilt gently and pulled the sword out of its sheath. The blade, like the hilt and scabbard, was black. It looked like black onyx and reflected light like a crystal. The blade of the sword was shorter than the scabbard. From the cutting edge to the back, it was about 1.5 inches long. About 7 inches below the point of the blade, the back of the blade flared out, then ran straight to the point. The cutting edge tapered down to meet the bottom, making the point. Naruto looked at the blade with a soft smile and whispered, "It's incredible." Aragon smiled and said, "Yes. It is." He said softly, "And you need to name it." Naruto thought for a while, then smiled and said, "Vinder." "Because like me," he said softly, "you'll feel the wind rush over you." Aragon smiled and said, "I like it. A good name. Now, please, let us test your sword." Naruto smiled in anticipation and said, "Yes, sensei." In auto, Sasuke walked into Orochimaru's throne room and stood in front of him. He just asked. Even though he was in pain, the snake Sannin smiled. His body was rejecting him, and it was time for him to take on his true form. "Yes, Sasuke-kun. It looks like I'm out of time, which is a shame. I'm ready to switch bodies. And you already know what that means, right? You promised to help me beat my brother first," Sasuke said with a growl. He said with anger, "Then I would give you my body." "Oh, I know, Sasuke," Orochimaru said with a laugh. "But it looks like I can't keep my end of the deal." Sasuke growled, before smirking. "Gee. That's too bad," he said as his lightning-covered fist tore through the back of the throne and Orochimaru's chest. The Sasuke in front of him disappeared in a puff of smoke, and the real Sasuke stood behind the throne with blood and bits of flesh on his left arm. He whispered to the shocked Sannin, "It looks like I can't either." "B but. H how? Why?" Orochimaru sputtered, and Sasuke just laughed in a dark way. "When I had my Sharingan out, I saw that Dobi used shadow clones every time. I grabbed it and kept it as my best card. About why? Once more, the Dobi. He was my main competitor. And the most important test of my strength. Before I fought Itachi, I was going to fight him. But due to you, he's gone. You took something from me, so I'm doing the same to you," he said as he tore off his hand and drove another Chidori through the snake Sannin's head, causing it to explode. Kabuto ran in and saw Orochimaru's headless body lying on the throne, with blood dripping from the neck and chest wounds. Sasuke was walking toward him, covered in blood, flesh, and brain matter. He had already gone by Kabuto when he stopped. "Want to get back at your master?" he whispered. Kabuto just stood there, and Sasuke sighed. "That's what I thought," he said as he went to his room. "It's time for me to move on. Orochimaru had nothing more to teach me, so now I start the hunt again." 1 year later, in Aragon's cave, Naruto slowly stirred the soup that was cooking in a pot over the fireplace in the kitchen. His eyes were a little blurry as he thought about the last year of his life. After he had his sword forged, his training had gone well. Aragon had taught him a spell that could block the edges of their weapons so they couldn't slash, cut, or hack. Then they had a spar. Naruto was shocked by how quickly and powerfully Aragon used his sword Brisengiar. Naruto had thought he had grown to be as strong as Aragon, but now he saw that Aragon had been keeping something from him. After a few weeks of sparring, Naruto was finally used to Vinder. Then Aragon made it harder by teaching Naruto to fight while wearing armor. At first, Naruto wore only chainmail, and then Aragon added bracers, greaves, pauldrons, a helmet, and then a shield. Each time Naruto got used to a new piece of armor, Aragon would hit him until he got used to the next piece. His study of the ancient language also picked up, and as his knowledge and magic grew, so did the number of spells he knew. Onyxia kept getting bigger, faster, stronger, and smarter, too. The two of them were like brothers and sisters, always joking around and scolding each other. But as Naruto and Onyxia got stronger, Aragon's health started to get worse. He had more and more coughing fits, and his strength started to go away. Not even a month later, he was bedridden, and Naruto spent his time training and caring for his teacher. When the soup was done, Naruto slowly poured some into a bowl and took it to Aragon's room, where the dragon rider was lying with shallow breathing and pale, sweaty skin. Aragon grunted softly as Naruto sat down next to him. As Naruto's brown eye opened and focused on him, Aragon tilted his head toward Naruto and said, "Don't bother." He said, "I won't keep it down anyway," in a tired voice that showed how weak he was. Naruto shook his head and said, "You need your strength." He put some soup on a spoon and held it up to Aragon's mouth, but the old man shook his head. "No. It's not what I need. Naruto. I'm not going. Enough for the day." He said, "This is the end." Naruto shook his head and said, "You'll still be around for a while, sensei. Only eat." Aragon shut his eyes and said, "No. Naruto, this is the end of my story. I've been alive for way too long now. It's time," he whispered. "It's time for me to go back to Saphira, my dragon. My family and friends." Naruto shut his eyes as tears started to form. "I can't lose you. Sensei. You've cared for me like a father. Please. I need you." Aragon gave a soft chuckle. "And you have been an excellent student. The sun. But I can't always be around. I must make room for what's new. Naruto. I've seen how torn you are. You are a nice person. I know that you will be the one to help make the world a better place." He said in a whisper, "I trust you." Aragon's eyes closed, his limbs went limp, and his breathing stopped, but Naruto just sat next to him and spoke softly to him. Naruto had been sitting there for an hour, staring at his sensei's body for the past 2 years. He closed his eyes as tears fell silently. That night, he and Onyxia dug a grave on top of the cliff. Aragon's body was put in the grave with respect by Naruto and some of his clones. The old rider's sword was placed on top of Aragon's chest. Naruto used magic to fill in the grave and make a tombstone that said, "Aragon. Aragon Shadeslayer is buried here. Sensei, father. He will always be missed." Naruto sat in silence by Aragon's grave after burying his sensei. He knew Onyxia was crouched close by, so he sighed and turned to face her. "So. What's next?" he whispered. "I don't know," said the black dragon with a shrug. "I only know I follow you wherever you go. But I have a question for you. Do you want to go back to Konoha?" As he thought about it, Naruto looked at her and said, "No. No, I don't. That town is. I was attacked by them. They gave me nothing to eat, beat me, and treated me like trash. They would gladly piss on my dying body, but they would praise a traitor like Sasuke. Even after everything I've done for them. If I came back, the councils would probably say I ran away from Konoha and tried to kill me," he said angrily as memories of his time in Konoha came back to him. He began to draw Kyuubi's chakra without realizing it. Inside, Kyuubi could feel Naruto's sadness and anger, and it could also feel its power draining. It smiled and said, "Now. It's my turn now. With his will and spirit so broken, I'll be free." It roared and slammed its chakra against the cage and seal that kept it in Naruto's body. Outside, Naruto growled, then stiffened up, groaned in pain, and fell to the ground on his back. "Naruto? Naruto!" Onyxia yelled, trying to figure out what was wrong in a panic. Naruto found himself in front of Kyuubi's cage as the giant fox slammed more chakra against the bars. The chakra Naruto had drawn from outside the cage was already growing, fed by the sadness and anger Naruto had been feeling. "Soon, little human," the Kyuubi said with a smile. "I'll break this seal soon. Then I'll eat your soul and take your abilities for myself." The Kyuubi started a new attack, shooting chakra at Naruto. Naruto raised his hand quickly and said, "Skolier Aka. Shield me." Kyuubi's chakra hit an invisible field and retreated. Naruto smiled and told Kyuubi, "You should stop. If I use up all my magic, we will both die." Kyuubi smiled and said, "I don't have to beat you. I just need you to stop so I can break this seal." Once more chakra attacked Naruto and Kyuubi kept trying to break the seal. Naruto tried to attack, but the chakra always stopped him and put him on the defensive. The paper seal kept breaking down, and more chakra came to attack Naruto. "Give it up, Naruto," the big fox said with a grin. "Your moment of weakness has." The Kyuubi was cut off by a roar and a blast of flames that pushed the red chakra back. Onyxia showed up in Naruto's mind, protecting him by crouching in front of him. She queried. "We have to stop him," Naruto said with a nod. "He wants to get rid of the seal." As she attacked, Onyxia nodded, and Naruto did the same thing with a blast of black fire from his hands. The Kyuubi roared and used its chakra to fight back against their attacks. "I am the most powerful Biju. I won't give up." Naruto growled as he made his attacks stronger. "I'm not going to stop. I won't let you go, and I won't let you hurt the people I care about." He called out. "You're no one." Kyuubi yelled. "Who do you think you are to stand up to me?" It roared as it pushed Naruto and Onyxia away. They fought, and Naruto slowly moved away. "I am Naruto Uzumaki," he said. "I am Aragon Shadeslayer's student." He shouted as his power grew against the Kyuubi. He started to push back against Kyuubi's power. "And I am a Dragon Rider," he roared as he and Onyxia attacked Kyuubis with all their strength. After a flash of red and white light, everything went quiet.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.